Well, good morning, everybody. It's an honor to be here today. I came down here struggling a little bit about the topic because, and I want to get this out right away, because we don't have, and I don't have, me meaning Bad River, and I, as a chairman, don't have the credentials as far as a proven track record to really speak at length on the topic that I'm going to be talking about today. But there's a reason why I was looking forward to coming down here and why I'm honored to be here and why I'm excited to be here to talk about sustainability, sustainable economic development, and food. And it's because, as a way of speaking, I think it cuts directly to sovereignty, and I think it is one of the most promising paths forward for a lot of our tribal communities. Now, I want to acknowledge before I get going, Chairman Delgado, and the fact that Oneida is an incredible model of farm systems and orchards and the Buffalo business that represents livestock and food rearing. But and I think you have a food summit coming up at the end of April. That's going to be really wonderful. Dan Cornelius has done a lot of good things. Where did these notions of food and food systems and things come from? For me, when I started as chairman 5 years ago, none of this stuff that I'm going to talk to you about today was really in my mindset. I was very dialed in as a hunter-gatherer, very dialed into our treaty rights. I speared fish, I shot a lot of big bucks, filled the freezer every year off of the foundation of my treaty rights. Became chairman, and along comes a mine. Along comes a proposed mine. And pretty soon we're fighting for our lives. And there's some interesting things that rose up as a result of our fight. The first thing was seeing for the first time, and maybe very, very viscerally and tangibly, the life of our nation and the foundation of our nation and the strength of our nation being our natural resources, our groundwater aquifers, and our water resources in a way that I'd never seen it before. I realized that was more than I had ever thought before, the true foundation for all of those good things that we as Ojibwe could have by way of Montezuma, that good life that our ancestors and all of those spirits out there want for us. So as we got going, battling the mine, as we got going trying to manage our resources, I found out some things along the way. Number one, I could ask right in here today, who has more than enough money in their pocket, in their bank accounts, in their life? And not many people are going to raise their hand. I would dare say nobody's going to raise their hand. If I sat down with the tribes and asked that, there ain't a tribal chairman that would raise their hand. And there's an interesting thing about that. When we start looking at economic development and we start looking at our foundation and where we're at in terms of profit and loss and making money and this and that, it's very simple. One of the things that I say to our council, just to try and keep us in perspective. I could sit down right there, and if you were the feds and the state and private donors and foundations and angels on your shoulder kind of people with tons of money, I could cry for the next 3 days straight about how Bad River doesn't have enough money. And I'd get up out of that chair and I'd walk out the door, and in would walk my good friend John Greendeer, Ho-Chunk, and he would sit down, and there's an interesting thing that would happen. At $4.5 million a year, Bad River just got done crying for 3 days how they need more money. John Greendeer, which is hard to kind of estimate, at a couple $100 million a year, could do the very same thing. He could talk about how Ho-Chunk needs more money for his people for the next 3 days. And then he'd get up and leave, and Barack Obama would sit down in that chair with trillions, and he would cry for the next 3 days straight about how he needs more money. My point being, of course, is that chasing the almighty dollar is got us in this day and age right now where we have high rates of poverty, we have a lot of things that work and don't work, and we have a lot of tribal people struggling. And I think across the Anishinaabe country, I don't think it's misrepresentation to say we have a lot of tribal people struggling in our communities, and for a variety of reasons. So where does that leave us? As the mine fight reared up, going to different ceremonies, listening to different elders, there are things that came as, I guess, kind of guiding principles. One was, in one of our ceremonies, one of our spiritual leaders told all of us as tribal leaders, Ojibwe leaders, everything you need to stop that mine is all around you. And I've been thinking about that for years now. I've also heard we're on a journey, and we're going to have a beautiful journey, but in order to move forward, we're going to have to go backwards a little bit. I've also heard, take this and turn it around back on itself. And these were some interesting things, and you got the thoughts going. So, I'll take you back to this past fall. Everyone remember the government shutdown? The government shutdown. And it was an interesting case study in where we're at as a tribal nation. Where we were at was, as it kind of dragged on, we got to being within a few weeks of our little house of cards built on federal monies and such, starting to collapse in on itself. Little implosions in our tribal structure starting to struggle. Our casino revenues weren't doing that great. And all of a sudden we're starting to see a very dire kind of short-term economic future with some of those government monies drying up and our people not being able to work. But what was really of interest to me during that government shutdown deal was what I saw this past fall manifest itself as a representation of what happened to us a couple hundred years ago. And before I finish my thought on this past fall and the government shutdown, I'm going to take you back to 1850. In 1850, the U.S. government wanted Ojibwe out of this country. They wanted to take us out of our place up here by the big lake in this beautiful area. One of the ways they sought to do that, if you recall, is they lured us to Sandy Lake with promises of payments and annuities and everything else. And in the winter, our people journeyed over there. And their outcome was to weaken the resolve of the Ojibwe and kind of acquiesce them into moving further west eventually with payments. Our people went to Sandy Lake in the winter. Those payments never arrived. They were tricked. And on the journey back in that harsh winter, we had 400 Anishinaabe die on the trail. And that's remembered through a lot of our efforts through Lipwick and as the tribes, as the Mikwanda ceremony that we do every year, where we remember the ancestors that passed on that. And those Ojibwe went back, and fire grew in their heart, and then they rooted down in, and we're here today on account of them. But what I'm talking about, and why I bring up Sandy Lake, is that luring that took place over to Sandy Lake. Why were our people lured over? And it could be said that it was on account of dependency. Dependency on government, dependency on food distribution, dependency on annuity payments and things like that took place. Obviously, if we went back a couple hundred years earlier, the Ojibwe would have never had to travel to Sandy Lake. We were self-sufficient, we were autonomous for millennia. That dependency hurt our people. Now let's flash forward back to this fall and the government shutdown. As I'm sitting here watching this house of cards about to start imploding, and I'm thinking to myself, this government's got to get back to work. And this has to pick up and reboot, you know. I found out that our commodity distribution trucks and our food payments were paid to January. Commodities would be delivered to the res till January. And in the moment, it was really easy to extrapolate out beyond January and to start thinking in real tangible terms as a tribal leader who was looking at the finances, who was looking at all those different things that were starting to red flag and fall apart. And think, what am I going to do after January if there's no more food distribution being delivered to our people, if people are being laid off, if things are, and so on and so on. And I realized, and that's when I thought about Sandy Lake, and I thought about food security, and I thought about what Paul Davis, I think from Oneida, said when he said, you can't talk about sovereignty until you can feed your own people. And I thought about Bad River, how we are unbelievably blessed with land, how we are unbelievably blessed with water and a lake, and about what we need to do to right ourselves. So there are some things that I want to talk about today, and the outcome that I came down to talk about today was to jar the paradigm that each of you have today, was to just give you some food for thought, no pun intended, to give you some things to think about, and again, no pun intended, to kind of plant a little seed to see where that may go. And I think, again, going back to the drive down, not having the track record to lean back on and say, look what I've done, is part of the beauty of coming down here to talk to you today. Looking at Oneida and their successes, look what they've done, is part of the beauty of dreaming the dream of what can be. So, to get started, sustainable economic development. I'm no expert. As this mind fight and as the challenge of trying to meet the needs of our people has ramped up, I'm learning on the fly, going to conferences, going to different workshops and taking little classes to learn about some of these principles. And of course, all of that comes in, and I filter it for what I need. And here's what I'll start by saying. Right now, as we sit here and we talk today, and as maybe yesterday and tomorrow, it's going to all be about money. It's going to be about the bottom line. One of the beautiful things about sustainable economic development is you get into notions of local living economies. A local living economy can almost be thought of as a living organism. And so then rather with the dollar sign as our ultimate goal, we can take that dollar sign and we can set it over a little bit. We don't want to throw it away because, let's be realistic, money's still the driving force in a free market capitalistic society, but we can slide it over. And guess what other things we can put in there? We can put in things like, and this might be difficult for some of you, but we can put in things like compassion. We can put in things like taking care of each other. We can put in things like taking care of our elders and our children. We can put in things like love, connection to land, to water. We can put in things like diabetes prevention, alcohol and drug abuse prevention, mental health and wellness counseling. We can put in activities, human activity, movement. We can put in all those things into a local living economy and start to look at what can we do. So the first thing that I started thinking about was hunter-gatherer. As a hunter-gatherer, right now, there's nobody more positioned to kind of survive in, I guess, today's day and age, and to live a good life than Anishinaabe people. If you, as a hunter-gatherer, if any native in here would tell you, all you have to do is have a best friend who's non-tribal and talk deer hunting. And you start to see immediately how the life that we have available to us in terms of hunting, fishing, and gathering is unbelievably gifted. Just on a deer hunting perspective alone, the first thing you're going to hear is, I give my right arm to be able to hunt the way you guys do. You get into the reservation, and it extrapolates. We can gun hunt and take deer as we need from July to January 31st up in Bad River. Right now, if I had a tribal person come to me that was starving or for ceremony, I can issue a permit and they can go take an animal and feed themselves. That does not exist in the real world, I'll just say that. Okay? Fishing's the same way, gathering's the same way. When we start getting into some of the other treaty rights and the harvesting opportunities, that exists there. So I'm going to set the treaty rights side, or set the treaty rights discussion aside for a second. Getting into talking about food and growing power and tribal initiatives that are designed to help their people, there's a green kind of component to this, all right? The agricultural, the livestock, the growing, the systems that would come with producing food, a la Oneida, a la Winona Leduc over in the White Earth Recovery Project. And I see this. And now if you grab that treaty rights realm and the hunting and fishing and gathering, and some of the skills that some of these Ojibwe guys in our communities have, I see this. And when you bring that together, there's nobody better equipped to kick Monsanto's ass and to really strengthen and provide for their communities than Anishinaabe. There really isn't. So, big picture, how does that play out? These are some of the paradigms that I just would like to throw out there, and maybe some of it would be of interest to you, maybe some of it won't, but these are ideas, and it's meant to just provoke thought for today. Treaty rights. We can't go after lumber because the courts kind of ruled in a nutshell that through the eyes of our ancestors, when those treaties were signed as Anishinaabe, lumber, harvesting trees for boards and things like that weren't really part of the equation. It was more fuel and heat and things like that. Flash forward to today, tribally, we're looking at different projects like biomass facilities. One of the biggest challenges of a biomass facility and a feasibility study is going to be coming up with dependable, economical, and efficient feeder stock. What is feeder stock? Well, it depends on the biomass facility that you choose, but in our case that we're looking at, it's wood chips, it's the things that are kind of left out after a logging crew would leave the site. It's all of that refuse, that organic combustible refuse that's there, chipped up and fed into a biomass facility. What I find really interesting, and I've pushed it a couple times at the Glifoot realm, and I think it's getting traction on account of some of the recent agreements with the Forest Service, is that biomass feeder stock is a treaty right of the Anishinaabe. And now this would have to be probably tangled in court, because anytime the Anishinaabe and Ojibwe people would go after something that would be to the diminishment of the greater dominant society, state government, federal government, there's always a pushback, right? But in ceded territory, for all of the logging that goes on in the national forests, we could also say all of the logging and all those things that go on in the state forests, all of the stuff that is left in terms of refuse, all of the stuff that is taken in the name of biomass, and there are biomass facilities all around us, all of that could be claimed as 50% belonging to the Ojibwe. And the simple premise is biomass produces energy, biomass produces heat for homes, and biomass is what exactly is exactly what we used to collect wood for back when our ancestors signed those treaties and before that. And when you start looking at it through that treaty rights realm, and you start looking at economic development and biomass facilities, what they can do for your communities, saving energy, heating homes, heating communities of poverty, stricken people, there's some really interesting things. And so from a jobs perspective, we start looking at, where's the tribal logging crew? Where's the intertribal logging crew? Is there an intertribal utility that's waiting to be developed out there where all the Anishinaabe own one big energy company? And all that feeder stock, that 50% of the feeder stock that is in all these national forests across a 3-state area are generating that, and that's being sold back to the major energy producers. And if that's done correctly, all of that is regenerative, all of that is sustainable, and all of that is really interesting, because there's things like up in that river, as we're working and developing all of these notions of biomass, we're also attaching greenhouses to our plant. And greenhouses attached to that will give us growing power year-round. And greenhouses and other greenhouses would be able to do things like, number one, produce food for our people. Number two, produce food for our programs. Number three, produce food for our own markets. And then in the next greenhouse, maybe we're producing white pine, and maybe we're producing red pine. Maybe we're producing cedar, and we're selling back to the government the very types of conifer component and beautiful seedlings, a la Red Lake in Minnesota, selling back to the government and the forestry programs there, the very types of things that we want to see planted in some of the areas that we just utilize for our biomass facilities. These are just thoughts to get things going. So when you start looking at some of those types of projects, sustainable development and the jobs portion start to creep up. And each tribe couldn't tackle that individually as a sovereign nation, but as collective Anishinaabe, each holding all of the same treaty rights in different areas, we could also someday talk about doing that intertribally. And then, obviously, there's nothing standing in the way of talking intertribally with other friends and other tribes, that are to the south and other states. So, the thing about that stuff is that's a big picture tribal idea, and it jumps into other notions of food production, such as aquaponics, the raising of fish for market, as it jumps into hydroponics, where you're growing greens and fish at the same time. Some of that stuff doesn't have to be massive, like in this building here. There are people doing hydroponics and aquaponics in small, little closed circuit operations that are as big as bunk beds. The ultimate goal, I think, goes back to that outcome model that we talked about, where we slid that dollar sign over and we put in some of those humanity items: love, taking care of each other. Let me drop down into what I see up in Bad River and how this might work. On the treaty rights realm, our tribe doesn't really have any initiatives in place, anything systemic, anything within the tribal realm that encourages treaty rights gathering. And as maybe it's not so much here in Flambeau, but up in Bad River, it's about a 40-mile, 50-mile car ride to some of the nearest spearing lakes. And so there's an economic deterrent, or there's a money deterrent that takes place when our people go to harvest. Now, there's a reality that I confronted my first year in office. It was an interesting thing that I saw. It was seeing $16,000 in our budget systemically as a matter of doing business, right? $16,000 to buy 400 turkeys to be given out to every worker and tribal member and things like that around Thanksgiving time. And I thought to myself, that's really interesting, right? Because in terms of growing food, in terms of encouraging our harvesters, in terms of all those other things that are possible, we were putting nothing into that. And so you got that one turkey at Thanksgiving, and everyone went away happy. I cut that down, and oh my God, I got claims of elder abuse, and he hates his people, and everything under the sun by trying to just drop that money down so we can do other things, right? But there's something to be said about that. That was put in there as an entitlement kind of deal. And how we spent that $16,000 as an example, I thought merited discussion. Discussion like, what if we put $16,000 into a already operating small sustainable farm around us on a contract for them to grow as many turkeys as they possibly could. And when we started running some of those numbers, we could buy 1,000 and provide 1,000 turkeys for the same number rather than a few hundred. When we started talking and with some of the people, the farmers that were around Bad River there, when we started talking about chickens and chicken coops and things like that, all of a sudden that $16,000, I came to find out, represented an unbelievably lucrative small contract for a lot of the local farming communities around us, a lot of the local farms. They looked at that $16,000 as something that was an incredible, gift to build into their budget and how their business plan would work. And in return, we could be getting back an incredible amount of food. Well, within the tribal realm, we're looking at 3 main farming sites. And how we want to have some of this stuff come back around is we want these farms to produce food. We want these farms to produce an orchard. We want these farms to produce livestock and food for our people. Now, how does that work? We all have commodity distribution. We all have food shelves. And I don't know how it's managed in other places, but I'll tell you what's an opportunity for Bad River. When I asked about our food shelf about a month ago, I said, actually in mid-January, because there's 2 weeks left of deer season, I asked the food shelf folks, if I went out and shot 5 deer today, cut everything up, where's your freezers, and could I fill one? Do you have space? And the response I got from a food shelf perspective was, I think we got a freezer. Do you know where that freezer is? To one of the other colleagues. Yeah, I think we got it over there. It's not that big. I don't know if it's plugged in or not. And I realized right there, from a food shelf perspective, we weren't managing and guarding the gate. But these farms can provide to those food shelves. And these farms can provide to food shelves in different communities. And it also provides an outlet for harvesters to start taking care of their people. Now, when we look at these farms, there's some problems in Bad River. We're struggling financially. How do we get started? And there's some beautiful things that have come up. Number one, I have people who will take all of those bleak economic assessments and all that lack of money and all of this and that, and they'll go, well, I got a pocket full of seeds, and I'm going to go till some earth, and I'm going to plant. And for the past few years, they've been producing food on nothing. And they're producing food, and they're going into our youth programs, and they're doing little workshops on how to save seeds. They did workshops on how to can venison. They did workshops on canning the different squash and pumpkins and rutabagas and all the different vegetables that they grew. And they're doing that on nothing right now. But these farms represent an opportunity to grow. Well, we were talking the other day, and this is one of those tribal initiatives that just meant for Bogota. We were talking the other day about, well, how do we start? We got to buy soil. And when you look at a tribe, I see a spearfisherman out there. I know that Flambeau spearfisherman that's sitting in the back there produces by himself about probably 4 to 5 coolers of fish guts every spring. And that's a weird thing to think about. He produces 4 to 5 coolers of fish guts, and his buddy does too. And so does his other buddy. And when you look out across the Flambeau community, there's probably 200 men that will each produce 4 to 5 coolers of fish guts. Now you weigh those fish, you weigh all those coolers up, and there's an incredible amount of weight and an incredible amount of volume of unbelievably super-powered, like steroid-infused growing fish emulsion that could be broken down and turned around for growing initiatives in the community. So that's just the individual harvester, and that's that treaty rights realm. On the tribal side, I'm looking at, we have 2 hatchery ponds where we do 1 million fingerlings, about 400, 500,000 fry, our fingerlings, and we do about 1 million fry. I had that backwards. But when those big hatchery ponds that are huge, they're as big as the casino, you know, when they're done and all those fish are released back into the water systems, Kakagan and Bad River, those ponds are filled with this brown gook. And that brown gook is refuse from all of those little bitty babies, right? And that has been, I think we've had years where we've paid people to come in and take that. And you know what they do? They take that and they sell it for an incredible amount of money. And if you look at some of these growing agricultural magazines, you'll see pure fish emulsion, and you'll see little bitty canisters like this for 25 bucks a piece, because they're just super powered and steroid packed for growing. I got hatchery ponds. I got individual harvesters and all those traditional dump sites, if we could monitor that. I got the Bad River Casino, the Bad River Restaurant. I got the Bad River Grocery Store, the Head Start program, the elderly feeding program, the summer youth feeding program. I've got tribal members who could be persuaded, maybe at some incentive in the waste management realm, because we pay for our garbage bags and things like that, who may choose to compost their organic combustibles. Now, I got space over by the waste management area where we could collect all of that and bring all of that. And all of a sudden, within 1 year, maybe it's this year, we're talking about tons of compost that is going to be unbelievably ready to grow food for our people. And if that ain't enough, in the Bad River Falls, as an example, we have a sucker run that looks like the stories of the old sturgeon runs in Bad River from a couple hundred years ago. Sucker runs that are so thick in the rapids, you could like almost walk across the backs of them. There's 100,000 suckers in there, at least, on any given day. Each one of them is about, when you look at them, is about 3 pounds a piece. So, off of the composting effort that we did to get started, if I sent a couple of tribal members down and paid them, because again, we're talking about jobs, they could take 1,000 of those fish and come back with 3,000 pounds more potential fish emulsion for growing. And none of that would even put a dent in the sucker run. None of that would even put any of our fishery in danger. And it would provide an opportunity for our people to take care of themselves, an opportunity for some of our people to go down and live a good life as they're doing that. Because if I said, I got an office over here where you can make $12 to $14 an hour, or I can pay you a decent wage, and you love seasonal work anyway, then you can spend your days down at the falls during the fish run. Your hours are your own. If you choose to stay after dark and spear some walleyes, that's up to you. Our outcome is we need these fish for this composting effort. There's an incredible opportunity for a lot of our tribal people who are looking for that kind of outlet to make money and also live closer to our Ojibwe ancestry. So the composting effort, the 3 farm systems, and then looking at things similar to Oneida. I mentioned buffalo as livestock in one of our meetings recently, and I got a good chuckle. I got a good chuckle from some of our people, and I like that, because it is a shock at first for some of us, especially up in this part of the country. But we have an incredible land base, and what I said very quickly was, Oneida's rearing 75 buffalo. What if we did that? And what if we harvested 5 adults? 5 adults, that's just say 800 pounds a piece. That's 4,000 pounds of buffalo. Let's take 50% off for bones and everything else. That's still 2,000 pounds of buffalo meat. And let's say after we did take the choice cuts, we have 1,500 pounds of buffalo meat. Do you think our elders who screamed about those turkeys, that 1 turkey a day at Thanksgiving, do you think our elders might enjoy 1,500 pounds of buffalo meat that is raised organically, sustainably, at home? 1,500 pounds, 1.5 tons of good buffalo meat infused into the LA program. Do you think they'd like that? And again, who's taking care of those buffalo? Tribal members who are getting paid, who's building the infrastructure and some of the things that we're going to need to do that stuff. I would say tribal members. So, infrastructure. We got these gardens that we want to build, and we got storage sheds, and we have a farmhouse that we need to replenish. We have other things that we need to build. I take you back to the biomass realm. That logging crew is going to be supplying our biomass facility in those greenhouses. but they're going to also be doing other things. Through our MOUs with the Forest Service, there's possibilities of delineating areas for lumber cutting. They're not completely against that, and that's in our MOU with the feds as Anishinaabe to start going after. So what if we had a portable sawmill? A little portable sawmill, and I had a couple of guys running that to create rough cut lumber. Our ancestors built their communities and built beautiful houses and lived their lives in beautiful houses made out of rough cut lumber. Back in the day, if we go backwards a little bit. Today, we go and we get that bid, we're at Carlson's Building Supply, and you see that huge number for what it would take to buy 20 2x4s and a few sheets of plywood, and it's like, oh, can't do that. Can't do that, we can't afford that. But if our logging crew's going out there, and as a byproduct of feeding a biomass facility, they bring some lumber to a portable sawmill where tribal members are milling, all of a sudden we're creating boards that could go to storage sheds for farming equipment, that could go to building small chicken coops, that could go to building farmhouses, that could go to building buffalo pens, and all of that. And that's through our treaty rights, and that's through essentially a wholesale, no middleman kind of enterprise. And again, I'm only talking about Bad River in terms of just dreaming the dream here. The possibility of doing that intertribally looms. The possibility of doing that intertribal utilities still looms, right? But there's other little things that may have meaning. Because I talk and I bring no props or nothing like that, when everybody stand up. Okay. Okay. Just kind of maybe in a little circular. In a circular way, everybody file through the back. I put some napkins in the back with a little treat for you. Please file your way back and go grab that. When everybody sits down, I'll finish it. Make sure you stretch and kind of wake up a little bit, especially if I'll put you to sleep.
I'm like cutting.
Nobody.
I know, I saw this when I came in and I was like, is it sugar? Yeah. You can take it. Yeah, it would be like generation.
So what you're grabbing right there is maple sugar.
But the best.
Yeah.
Maple sugar that I just made about 3 weeks ago. So as I kind of wrap up and finish the talk, I want you to take a little bit of that, just keep kind of eating it, taste it, look at the texture, look at it a little bit. Kind of looks like brown sugar. Brown sugar that we see in plastic bags or we see for sale at
I think
market.
they're making a second pass. Yeah, that's what I think happened. They're coming through again.
Sure. Tell Chairman Wiggins that.
I think I have one there.
Oh, gee, you might have to.
What if I told you that Paul the Man down in the Pinocchio Mountains fighting the mining battle is going to market Pinocchio Gold this year? Pinocchio Gold meaning maple syrup and maple syrup products, maple sugar products. And what if I told you that in the research that we've done back in the late 1800s, between the Pinocchio Mountains and Flambeau, Anishinaabe produced 250,000 pounds of sugar. The sugar that you're tasting right there, 250,000 pounds of that. I find that really interesting. From a sustainable economic development perspective, I find 250,000 pounds of sugar very interesting. Because sugar, per pound, I think, goes for something around 25 bucks at market. So, I'm not very good at math, but what's 250,000 times 25? Probably more than our casino's gonna make this year, I think.
Yeah.
Going back to one of the things I told you in the beginning, if you take this and turn around back on itself, everything you need to kill a mine is all around you. Things like that. One of the things we also heard was that in order to fight this mine, you need to use maple sugar and kinnickinnick. Well, maple sugar is an interesting thing. The Pinocchio Hills, as an example, where we're fighting the mine fight, is covered in maple. Our reservation is absolutely saturated and covered with maple. If I could wave a magic wand and commandeer everything we need and the people and equipment and evaporators and everything like that from a maple syruping standpoint and threw it all into the Bad River bottoms as it snaked through the reservation on the Lake Superior, I could easily tap 50,000 trees. 50,000 trees would dwarf 250,000 pounds of sugar a year. And when I looked for deer antlers all through my youth in those river bottoms and in those sugar bushes, I never bumped into anybody making syrup. I bumped into old sugar bushes. I seen old cedar frames and some of the old remnants of metal pans and stuff. And what I found interesting, there was a cedar frame for a house, and wasn't cedar to be found anywhere up in the Highlands at all, so I don't know how long ago those had to be around. So going back to what I was saying about that little logging crew, they're doing the feeder stock for the biomass, right? They're doing the gathering of some of the lumber that we're going to need to facilitate some of the initiatives that we need to feed our people. What if, again, as a tribal initiative, we purchased a couple of really big community evaporators, and we plopped these evaporators down with feeder stock, because that logging crew on their way to the biomass facility and dropping off the lumber is going to drop some really nice dry firewood at that evaporator for our people. So as I sit here and I look at evaporators, a small one would cost me $2,000 easy. Plus I got to buy the cans and all of that and all that other stuff. Pretty soon I'm looking, I'm going to need $4,000 or $5,000 to make some syrup for my family this year. What if there was a community evaporator with a huge pile of feeder stock firewood that our tribal enterprises developed and delivered? And all I had to do was save some coffee cans and carve some sumac taps and get my kids going and take that 100 pounds of sap that I collected and head over to the community evaporator to boil down to 2.5 gallons of syrup. That little bag right there is part of about 8 bags of maple sugar. That little bag of sugar I brought was part of about 8 bags of sugar that came out of 3 quarts of syrup. And so that little bit that everybody took a little bit of for their coffee or for a taste, it was 3 quarts of syrup. What if we provided access to an evaporator, and for peanuts, a family could go boil down 2.5 gallons of sap, or syrup. In 2.5 gallons of syrup, I think there's 10 quarts. So if they took three of those quarts, saved 7 for syrup for their kids on their waffles, and 3 of them, and made it down to sugar, they'd have a huge pile of sugar, they'd have a lot of syrup, and more importantly, we have an enterprise, tribally, that's feeding some really interesting initiatives that benefit our people. I can tell you, and maybe Chairman Delgado can say this, when you get into tribal government, it's kind of really interesting. I can see things that need to be done that would immediately impact the lives of our people in a good way, and I reach out and I want to do that, and there's all this bureaucracy, and there's all these laws, and there's these ordinances, and there's this funding source, and we don't have this and that, and different politics, and all of a sudden, it's like looking at something that's so simple and that would benefit our people so easily, but it's beyond this really thick sheet of glass, and I can't get at it. And I'm like, can everybody see that? And everybody sees it, but nobody can get at that simple little initiative. There's bureaucracy in a nutshell. What I'm talking about with this little community evaporator initiative is a direct impact into the living rooms, into the kitchens, into the lives of our people. People that are struggling, people that are in poverty, people that want to stop seeing and reading about Ojibwe culture and life, and who want access to live it. And what's really interesting about this whole kind of phenomenon is that all of the things that I've talked about, and most of the stuff I've talked about, have administrative sides. There's going to be the business end of things, and there's going to be jobs for tribal people in that. But there's going to be those hands-on jobs where you're moving and you're doing things, and you're creating, and you're growing. A lot of that, a high percentage of everything that I've talked about today is outdoors. A high percentage of everything I talked about today means getting close to rivers, lakes, fish, and deer, and plants, and really represent an opportunity for our people to redefine, maybe, the life that we're currently living. And to redefine what we're all striving for, because we're all chasing money right now. And this is that last mention of paradigm. 5 years as a chairman, came in when I was 40, and now I'm 62. I've sat in meetings, and I've started to say this. I've sat in meetings where as chairman, we've sat around for 5 hours, and we've cried about the state and the feds, about how we don't have enough money. And I finally said one day, you know, I'm sick of sitting around crying about money. We need to start talking about some things that we can do without money, really. Because we can grow this stuff. We can start by taking a pocket full of seeds, tilling some earth, and growing. And as tribal leaders, and as I see all of you as tribal leaders and business leaders, there's some simple things we can do if we just start thinking about, like Chairman Molson said at the beginning, doing. And that's a challenge for us right now. But again, keeping it basic, keeping it grassroots, and building, and utilizing our grants, utilizing the USDA, utilizing tribal in-kind services. Somebody said the other day, do we have a tractor that could do that? I'm like, we move 400 million tons of snow every winter. You think we don't have a tractor within the tribe? But it's like this. I'm going to take a drink of that coffee right there. Oh, you can't drink that coffee. Why? Because the only time you can drink that coffee is when it's on that side of the podium. That's how our tribal infrastructure gets sometimes. There's a beautiful rototiller right there. You can't use it. That's the housings. Oh, really? Oh. So, it's a matter of how we see things and how we want to manipulate those tools around us. And I think the last thing I'll say is that one of the things that also comes with this goes back to other programs. In a farm that we inherited from an old lady, Ursula Schramm up in Iron County, beautiful. She raised sheep. She was real organic. Old farmhouse. In that farm setting, we have AODA that would love to get their hands on it. We have social services that would love to get their hands on that. We have other programs that would love to get their hands on that. And one of the really interesting outcomes is if we can develop an educational outreach, food growing initiative on that site, all of those programs will have a place there. Kids who are violent, I've seen them at the Prentice House Corporation International, Wisconsin. I've worked with them. I've watched them tend gardens and delicately handle flowers. People who are in recovery are going to be working soil and close to the land and have that action that's going to get that heart going. And there's some tangibles there. Places to get lost. All the outcomes that we want are there. For our kids, I look at it this way. Green power, treaty rights power, not only could they be master gardeners through some of the initiatives that we do, but we have the ability to teach our kids to be unbelievably efficient. And I'll say this, right? Killers. Deer, fish, game, all of that. And what you have are kids that by the time they're teenagers, they are going to be harvesters. And they are going to be looked at just like we have all of those harvesters in our community as go-to people. Somebody dies, talk to that kid. Kills a lot of deer. Somebody passes away, talk to that kid. He harvests a lot of fish. And those kids are going to go like this. Yeah, I can do that for you. And you're going to be proud. And you're going to be close to the land, you're going to be close to the earth. And this is my final thing. This is all, everything I've said, is all part of my diabolical private agenda to start a flower revolution on the Bad River Reds. None of our buildings have flowers. You walk in the casino here, you've got that beautiful island, right? The plants and the water flowing and this and that. You walk in our casino, there's concrete and dust. And I think to myself, my grandmothers surrounded themselves with flowers and birds. Every wise, older woman I knew in my life, and know in my life, surrounds themselves with flowers and birds. And that's my private outcome. And to get to that, we got to build this integrated food system first. So, just wanted to kind of share some of those ideas to just get the thoughts going, and really thank you for your time. 50,000 taps, intertribally, maybe we take on Pinoki Gold as a Anishinaabe, and we do 1 million pounds. Maybe we put Wisconsin back on the map above Vermont as the biggest syrup producer in the United States. The Anishinaabe are running that. It's all treaty right stuff, but it's all food too. So, all right, I'll end right there. Thank you.
Thank you. That was a great vision. I'm Brent Bryan, the Business Development Director for Live Farm Director. When you talk about maple syrup, we looked at this actually rather in depth. Whitworth has got probably one of the best mapping of maple syrup standards anywhere. Wisconsin, the cost of maple syrup, a gallon of maple syrup in Wisconsin is about $32 a gallon. Vermont sells it for $70. And so I was looking at, well, why is that? And it all goes down to branding. They branded their maple syrup the best maple syrup. And I think you get on something. There is an opportunity for maple syrup to brand it as Anishinaabe maple syrup and really offer that to the world. My experience with working with tribes is Indians are entrepreneurs. I've got a young man here, Jack Young, who has started a business building fish shank. Ice shank, that's right. And he rents them. So he built a couple of many rents them. And what a great entrepreneurial example that is. Government's stuck in business. You know, it doesn't matter if it's tribal government or U.S. government, it is stuck in business for the reasons that you outlined. So when tribes are successful at starting businesses, they separate the political from the business. America, for example, Colorado, for example. But what happens then is you have the ability to put people in place who can act, who can take action and do things. So in Flatbush, they're doing their business development. The same problems you talked about, which is budget constraint. We couldn't find any money to do some of the things that we were looking at. So I just want to follow up on one thing that you have in your backyard there that is an opportunity that I don't know if you're looking at, which is the internet. You guys just have fiber optic internet showing right through your reservation. And we've really looked at the internet as an opportunity for growth. Growth we don't know we have an asset, then we don't know. But I'm telling you that tribes have an asset, being sovereign nations and on the internet, that exists nowhere in the United States. It exists offshore, places like Costa Rica. And there's some folks that we had come here that were looking at business here in Costa Rica and offshore. And now they're looking at doing those businesses with tribes, because it's such a great domestic, it's got all the benefits of being in the United States and yet having a unique character. So the last thing I want to say is, if we don't know what we don't know, then we need to find business partners that can help us do that. And there's nothing wrong with doing it. Nothing wrong with having strategic business partners who would both win, and then we can generate income that can provide some of these infrastructure things, like buying evaporators, like buying those things that help us do things locally. So that's what I have.
I like that. Those are good points. And, you know, you kind of got me thinking too along a business model perspective. You know, there's a couple things like looking at nonprofit status for some type of integrated food system. There's other things as I'm learning. Like I never knew what a CSA was. And when you look at a farm, how many people, just raise your hand, know what is, look at a farm, a little business, how many people know what CSA means? Cassie, 1, 2? It's community supported agriculture. And some of these farms run by essentially selling memberships. You buy a membership ahead of the growing season, and throughout the growing season, and some of them are so advanced they grow year-round, you get bushels of fresh garden produce once a month, twice a month, whatever the setup is. But by buying those memberships, there's an influx of money and administrative capacity for that small farmer or that farmer to produce for their, as I heard one CSA farmer say, for my herd. and his herd is all of those people, those hundreds of people that bought those memberships. CSAs, when I mentioned that in our department head meeting to our staff in Bad River, nobody knew what it was. When I mentioned what it was, a whole bunch of them were like, what? We should be doing something like that. and so there's different models that are interesting. And here's what the point that jogged in my mind, Brett, is in Bad River, the only thing making money, and we have a fledgling business just getting off the ground based on our 101-mile fiber optic line from Marquette, Michigan to Duluth, you know, superior connections, wireless communications. That's still in its infancy. The only thing making money, and it's not making much money right now, is the gaming floor, right? And everything else is losing. And so it's really interesting. You could say things like, let's launch 50,000 native syrup taps and employ X amount of people for that X amount of time. And at the end of the day, if they break even, we've got the second most successful travel business going right now. And it could be funny, it can be sad. I see it as a beautiful opportunity. I see it as a landscape where we shouldn't be afraid to be innovative and afraid to try things. Because even if it lost $25,000, I could probably say it's darn near our second most successful travel business right now. And it can be grown. It can become better. So, any other questions or comments, sir?
I've got a question, but I was first going to just talk a little bit about the CSA. This is pretty good, because the last one I was involved with, they only take a 400 square foot lot, to feed about 22 people, or 22 households, so that's amazing for a community. But my question has to do with the biomass projects you mentioned. What scale are you guys looking at doing?
To speak on it technically isn't something I'm prepared to do today, but we have our casino enterprises, our Moccasin Trail Center, which is a grocery store, gas station, an elderly building, and our health and wellness center that would all be powered by. It's essentially the big enterprise buildings within our community. So fairly significant, but I don't have the data with me to talk about how much we would be moving as far as feeder stuff.
Okay, so it would be solely for the purpose of the energy, not for the agricultural land?
Well, we're going to look to attach the greenhouse initiative to it. So that's part of our grant efforts and our funding efforts right now. So, okay, well, thank you all very much.